I was in my late 20s when this happened. Back in the summer of 1986, I had taken a few days off work to go camping alone, something I did pretty often back then. I liked the solitude, the way the woods seemed to swallow up the noise of the world. This time, I had driven up to a remote spot in northern Oregon, deep in the Cascade Range. No designated campsites, no other people, just me, my tent, and the sound of the wind through the pines. I set up camp near a small creek, made a fire, and spent most of the evening just enjoying the quiet. By nightfall, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure what had startled me. The fire had died down, and the air inside my tent was cold. Then I heard a slow, deliberate crunching sound, like heavy footsteps moving through the underbrush. Not a deer, not a bear, this was different. The weight behind those steps was immense. I held my breath, listening, my pulse hammering in my ears. The footsteps circled my tent, slow and steady, as if whoever or whatever it was deliberately making its presence known. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe too loudly. Every instinct told me to stay completely still. The steps were heavy, pressing into the earth with a kind of weight that didn't feel natural. They would stop for a few seconds, then start again, shifting from one side of the tent to the other. I gripped the handle of my hunting knife, my fingers slick with sweat. I wanted to convince myself it was just a curious animal, maybe a bear sniffing around, but deep down, I knew better. No bear walks like that, slow, deliberate, almost thoughtful. Then, something even stranger happened. Just as I started thinking the thing might leave, I heard a second set of footsteps. Lighter, softer, almost playful. My stomach turned to ice. It sounded like a child padding through the grass beside whatever massive thing was out there. My brain refused to make sense of it. What the hell was a kid doing out in the middle of nowhere at this hour? The two sets of footsteps moved together, the smaller ones sometimes skipping, almost like a child playing alongside a parent. I wanted to unzip the tent and look, but fear held me frozen in place. I don't know how long I lay there, listening. 5 minutes? 10? An eternity? The footsteps eventually faded into the trees, but I didn't dare move until the first hint of dawn crept through the fabric of my tent. When I finally unzipped it and stepped outside, the forest felt off, like the air was heavier, pressing down on me. Everything was too still. No birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. Then I saw them, the footprints. They were massive, bigger than any boot print I'd ever seen, sunk deep into the soft earth, barefoot. The toes were wide, almost ape-like, and right beside them, scattered along the path leading away from my tent, were tiny footprints. A child's, small, delicate, and also barefoot. The two sets of prints moved together, weaving through the underbrush like a pair walking hand in hand. I crouched down, running my fingers over the indentations in the dirt, my mind struggling to grasp what I was seeing. There was no sign of any other campers, no tire tracks, no reason why a child, if that's even what it was, would be out here in the middle of nowhere. I followed the tracks a little way into the trees, my stomach twisting tighter with every step. The large footprints were spaced far apart, like whatever made them had a long stride. The small ones? They danced around them, sometimes veering off slightly before rejoining the path. It was eerie, almost like a game. The further I went, the more unsettled I felt. The woods weren't just quiet, they felt wrong, like I was intruding on something I wasn't meant to see. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the tracks stopped. No fading, no sign of turning back, just an abrupt end, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty ground ahead. The rational part of my brain kept searching for an explanation. Maybe they climbed a tree? Maybe the wind had erased the rest. But none of it made sense. And the longer I stood there, the more I felt like I was being watched. A prickling sensation crawled up my spine, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely afraid of the woods. I turned and hurried back to my campsite, packing up my gear with shaking hands. Whatever had been out there last night, I didn't want to meet it in daylight either. As I packed up, my hands fumbled more than once. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The trees seemed taller, darker, pressing in around me. Every crack of a branch, every rustling leaf made my heart pound. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something watching me from the tree line, but there was nothing. Just that suffocating silence. I forced myself to focus, tent down, gear packed, fire pit buried. I needed to get the hell out of there. I practically jogged back to my truck, throwing my gear into the bed without bothering to organize it. When I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the doors, I finally let out a shaky breath. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I wasted no time getting back onto the dirt road. But as I looked in the rearview mirror one last time, I swear I saw something standing at the edge of the clearing, tall, still, watching. My foot slammed on the gas, and I didn't stop driving until I hit the highway. I drove for hours without stopping, only realizing how tightly I was gripping the wheel when my fingers started to cramp. My mind kept replaying the sounds from the night before, those heavy, deliberate footsteps, the lighter ones dancing beside them, and those prints, the massive ones, the tiny ones. What the hell had I stumbled into? I didn't believe in Bigfoot or anything like that, but I couldn't deny what I had seen. Something had been out there, something huge, and something small. It wasn't until I reached a gas station on the outskirts of a small town that I let myself breathe. I stepped out, stretched my stiff legs, and made my way inside for coffee. The old man behind the counter gave me a once-over, probably noticing how rattled I looked. "You all right, son?" he asked, his voice rough with age. I hesitated before answering. What could I even say? That I'd spent the night listening to something unnatural walk circles around my tent? That I found tracks that ended in the middle of nowhere? Instead, I just shook my head. "Rough night camping," I muttered. The old man didn't press me for details, just nodded like he understood something I didn't. As I sipped my coffee, I overheard him chatting with another customer about the woods. "Lot of strange things up there," he said, his voice low. "People hear things, see things, some don't come back." That last part sent a chill through me. I wasn't about to ask for details. I just wanted to put as much distance between me and those tracks as possible. But as I turned to leave, the old man called after me. "You were up near the ridge. weren't you?" I stopped dead in my tracks. I hadn't mentioned where I'd been. I turned slowly, my mouth dry. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" The old man exchanged a glance with the other customer, then shrugged. "Used to be stories," he said. "A big one and a little one. Folks say they walk together." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "If you hear them, best not to look." My stomach dropped. I didn't ask anything else. I just got in my truck and drove. I never went back to that campsite, never told anyone the full story. And to this day, I still don't know what I heard that night or what might have been standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me leave.